Lamenting the challenges facing the orchestra industry has practically become an industry in itself. And in no area are the complaints voiced louder than when the conversation turns to contemporary repertoire by living composers. The creation and presentation of a new work seems like it should be a source of pride and celebration, not an event overshadowed by contention and aggravation. So what are the success stories? What are the roadblocks? 6 key industry professionals sit down and lay their cards on the table for NewMusicBox.org's Orchestra Summit 2006.
There's a definite psychology to the rapport that the orchestra has with the composer and the way that the information from the composer is transmitted to the orchestra. And there's a definite, I would never assume that I was ever going to speak directly to an orchestra. I always defer to the conductor and wait until the maestro actually turns and says something to me if they want me to engage the orchestra. If they don't, I usually take notes and pass that on after the rehearsal if it's of use, and kind of stay out of the way until told otherwise, basically. The players sometimes will come out and ask a question on the break or something like that. It really depends. It depends. I mean, oftentimes they just raise their hand, and if there's a problem, it can actually bring the rehearsal even to a grinding halt over a small detail, and it goes to the issue of the importance of kind of getting everything just right the first time around.
We did for a 100th anniversary of Seattle, we did a new piece of John Harbison's, a new symphony, a fabulous piece. And I've known John for many years, and I initiated the commission. And so the contract came. He wanted a rehearsal 6 months in advance, and then he wanted 5 rehearsals for the performance, including one the prior week. I mean, and so I called him, and I said, John, we've worked together a lot. Have I ever not given a great performance of a piece? And what was he going to say? Of course he says, no, you've always given great performances. I said, well, you have to trust me. I guarantee that this will be a great performance in our normal schedule. It's an easy program other than your symphony, and I know your language. We know we've played a piece of yours every year. We know your language. It'll be great. He said, I've had so many bad experiences with orchestras that even though I trust you, Jerry, and I think you're great, this is my deal. You want my symphony? This is what you have to do. We did it. I loved it. I mean, it made, the fact is, of course, when we did the premiere, it didn't feel like a premiere. It didn't feel like it felt like a piece we've been playing a lot. So one could say you lost the edge of the premiere, or one could say you represented the piece even in a better way. But I thought it was fantastic that he was successful in getting it done. If I had asked for that as a music director, I got the manager said, I need an extra rehearsal, and I want to pre-rehearse it in September, and we're doing it in May. The manager said, you're out of your mind.
As a union president, I do hear from composers, and I hear from them individually. And of course, the complaints I get, or the concerns that are expressed to me, is that our involvement, our piece of the puzzle here, kind of happens separate and outside from the whole process you're talking about, but certainly will impact them. And I'm already thinking, as we're having this discussion, that these kinds of discussions should not be absent from the bargaining table. I think that composers that come to us, and basically what the main thing they want is, how can I have more opportunities to have my work heard? And what exists currently in the agreements that may be prohibitive to that? How can the union help? And quite frankly, it's a little late hearing it at the end game. And on the front end of that conversation is when we should be having these discussions. And I think that that's something all of us should look toward.
For me, one of the biggest problems in getting a wider range of new music program, or more new music program, is something I said a little bit earlier, this enormous difference in vocabulary. And we're just coming out of an era now, and I think you're going to agree with this, Jerry, because I know where your tastes lie, and it's very similar to mine. We're coming out of an era now where composers writing who actually said, I want the audience to like this, and I'm writing for an audience that is a traditional symphony audience. Those composers for a long period of time were demeaned by a major part of the music establishment. I mean, the fate that Sam Barber suffered in much of his life because he wrote tunes. And there was a very strong emphasis underlined by a constituency that I wish were in this discussion and isn't, the music critic constituency, where it seemed to me the general thrust was, I, the critic, have to show that I'm smarter than my readers, so I like this music, whatever style, even if most of the audience didn't. And I can tell you, when that kind of music was programmed, often, as an administrator, I knew what my mail was going to be. I had a pre-written letter to which I always added a personalized paragraph. I have in my computer file at the Chicago Symphony a pre-written letter on the importance of us continuing to do new music by living composers. But I think that distance that developed between composers and public not only made it harder, but frankly, I have to say, legitimately made it harder for the music to be programmed. Prior to World War I, no composer wrote not caring what the public thought. Even those who had a problem, like Mahler, resented that problem, never would have said, I'm writing for myself and I don't care what the public thinks. And I think that was a very unhealthy period, frankly, and I do think we're coming out of it now.
But when you make one piece of the equation invisible, by not having it part of the community, visible from the stage, then it's off the radar and it's a signal that's sent. It's a tacit assumption that this is not important to us, we're not going to show it to you, so it can be marginalized and compartmentalized. But the other thing that is so important, and as a publisher, we see all the different sort of ways that orchestras involve and celebrate composers, torture composers around the world. When there's a music director and an administration that is sincerely and transparently passionate about any sort of programming they're doing, whether it's a Mozart festival or a brand new piece of Jerry is this personified, if the audience trusts the music director and they trust the institution as artistic leaders in a community, then they will go to all those gnarly places simply because they rely and trust the artistic leaders in their community. And when someone's saying, as you have with so many composers, not only am I going to do this one symphony, I'm going to do all the symphonies of David Diamond, and I'm going to record them, and I'm going to bring them back. And the audience understands that this isn't just a marginal piece, sort of a bonbon, but this is part of the ecology of an orchestra. Then you can't compartmentalize it, you can't put it away, because it's an organic piece of the institution, and that's where it works. And when it's presented simply because it's an important composer, it's an anniversary, we've got to do it, we insert it, we get a grant, that's where it's easy to dismiss it. It's a new music flyby, and that isn't what's going to strengthen the relationship. It's going to reinforce all of the sort of bad sort of will and the distance.
I came of age musically in St. Paul, and down the hall from the orchestra offices was an organization that had just been started by two composers, Libby Larson and Steve Paulson, called Minnesota Composers Forum, which became, the time I was there, a very key player in that whole community for new music. They represented composers, they got funding for competitions, they put on concert series, they placed works with the local orchestras. I moved to Milwaukee and I went around, where's the Milwaukee Composers Forum? There was none. And I don't think Milwaukee's that unusual. The difference was that in the Twin Cities, the composers were, neither Steve nor Libby had an academic position. They didn't have a living. They were actually out there hustling. In Milwaukee, all the composers are on the faculty of UW-Milwaukee. And, they get their works done there. But the energy to get the concept of new music out there in the community
That's right. I think
was not there. And I didn't realize, I think until I left, how unique Composers Forum was. And yet, that's what made new music work in that town more than any single other element.